Jerry Fry, audio historian of Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters. The following is the professional history of a PPB member told by herself in her own fashion on this February 12th of 2007 in Hollywood. These interviews are being audio taped in order to compile firsthand a living history of the members of our organization and stories of their professional experiences. Many of our members began in what is called the golden age of radio and television, and this is an attempt to preserve as much data as possible for succeeding generations. This recording is not intended for broadcast without first obtaining permission from Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters. And with me today in Hollywood is Kay Henley. She's the membership chairman of our illustrious organization, Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters. Kay, welcome to our little informal gathering here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We start these things usually by going back to the beginning, where you're from, where you were born, something about your childhood, and a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I was born in Duluth, Minnesota, and lived in a little outer area called Riverside, and it was right off of Lake Superior, which was great fun. And even though I left as a very young child, I still have fond memories of taking my first pair of skis, which I couldn't stand on, and putting them together and sliding down the hill on Spring Street, 6 Spring Street we lived at. Calumet 718. How's that for a memory?
Oh, boy.
I was 5.
Wonderful memory.
I know. And anyway, then I came to California. And
tell me a little bit first about your childhood there. Your mother and father were...
My parents were divorced. Mm-hmm. My mother came to California with her uncle and her brother.
Oh.
And left me with my grandmother and my aunts and uncles, which were like my brothers and sisters.
Right.
She came back and when she remarried and picked me up when I was about 5 and brought me to California. My daddy and I was love at first sight. And I lost him in '96, and I lost my mother a couple years ago.
Okay.
Anyway, so we lived here in Los Angeles, and mainly in Hollywood.
Uh-huh. Was there some particular reason why they chose California? The weather, or?
Well, my mother met him here.
Oh, I see.
She was working for her uncle in their restaurant, and my dad used to come in. He owned a gas station down the street, and he used to come in all the time, and that's how they met. And one thing led to another, and they married. And so then she came and brought me out here, and we lived on Ardmore. We lived in other places, but mainly Ardmore was my favorite, 625 North Ardmore. And then we moved to San Francisco for a while. My dad worked in the shipyards during the war. And then we lived in Oakland. We had a house there, and then my mom and I came back here until my dad could straighten out everything up there, and then he came down, and he bought another gas station.
Yeah.
And then I went to a grammar school, Alexandria Grammar School, Virgil Junior High School, Belmont High School for the first year, and then we moved to Culver City.
Uh-huh.
And I graduated from Hamilton High.
Hamilton High. Did you were in Culver City, so MGM was going big and strong in those days?
Yes, and I have to say I had no aspirations, really. I had appeared in a couple plays in junior high school and kind of like that, and I loved the movies and so on, but I was taught that I needed to get a job and be able to support myself, and I became a telephone operator for a while, and then I worked at long distance AT&T for a while.
Was that back in the days when telephone operators were saying, "Number, please"?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. And
that used to fascinate me when I was a kid.
It was great.
Pick up the phone, and here was somebody actually on the line saying, "Number, please," very friendly.
Yeah, and we had in Culver City, we had this area where we had to write the time that they started the phone call and then the time they stopped. Right. And we used to have people that would call in from one number and want it billed to another. So, and I thought, and that was great fun because I recognized certain people's voices quite often, and I would say, "Oh, this is Mr. So-and-so. I know you want it billed to Texas 0, whatever." And
those were the days also of party lines.
Yes.
When you'd have, 2-party and 4-party lines, as I recall.
Right, that's right.
Oh, boy. I remember going to, I think I was in grade school, maybe the 3rd or 4th grade, went through a tour of the local telephone office and actually seeing these operators lined up in the row, and the old mouthpiece used to come up like this, and the headphones they used to wear.
Well, we didn't have that. But
no, that was back in the 30s.
Yeah. But we did have to do our own stamping of the things on these little papers.
Uh-huh.
And then the supervisor would come by and pick them up,
Good.
whatever they did with them, tallied them.
Well, you were kind of in an adjunct part of broadcasting at that time.
Yeah.
At least in communications.
And I did get a lot of calls from MGM people, which
Mhm.
was kind of fun, and we'd sneak listening in when we weren't supposed to, of course, but sometimes we'd listen.
Sure.
Heard some pretty good stuff.
I bet. Did you keep notes about all those?
No, no.
Shucks.
No, I wouldn't want to do that. It was wrong in the first place, but it was great fun.
Could have written a book later in life.
Maybe, yeah.
So, and then you graduated high school.
I graduated high school. I met and married a man named Bill Henley.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had our son, Bob Henley.
Okay.
And then we got a divorce, and I have never remarried. And my son is married. I have a granddaughter.
Good.
She just got married in September. In fact, she and her husband are both working for my son and daughter-in-law now. My son has a construction company in Orange
great.
County.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm a proud mother and grandmother.
Grandmother.
Exactly.
Nice to have them close enough to see once in a while.
Absolutely.
And quite often. Excellent. So tell us a little bit about how, did you go on to college or just?
No, I didn't.
You went
I
right
just,
to work.
Mm-hmm.
So from the telephone company, then where?
Marriage.
Marriage.
And I was going to go back to work, and then I thought, no, I want to stay home with my baby.
Sure.
So I did. And then after that, when my husband and I divorced, I worked at Western Union, downtown. I moved in, a girlfriend and I, she had a child also, and her husband was in the service, and the four of us moved into a house in Hawthorne that my parents owned and used to rent out, so we lived there for a while. And so that's how I went to work at Western Union, because she was working at the telephone company, and she said they were hiring next door, and I thought, well, that'd be kind of a fun job. I never thought of that, you know.
Sure, sure.
So I worked there for a short time, and then, let me think and then I left there, and I was out of work. I'm trying to remember, it's been such a long time. I worked at Hughes Aircraft Company for 5 years.
And that was where?
First I worked at in the building 9 on Century by the airport,
Okay.
on Century Boulevard.
Uh-huh.
And then I moved on to the Culver City area, to the main place.
Okay.
And I worked there for a while. And I heard that Howard Hughes wore tennis shoes, and that he would come there a lot.
Uh-huh.
And I never saw him, of course, but I used to walk around and look at people's feet.
See if
to
you
see
recognize
if
the tennis shoes.
Saw tennis shoes, and then I'd look up to see.
In those days, people didn't usually wear tennis shoes at work, did they?
No, not really.
Yeah,
No.
unless you were a nurse or something.
Yeah.
No, I've heard some wonderful stories about Howard Hughes.
I know, we did too. We always heard about things that he was up to when we were there. But anyway, so then I moved to to Hollywood, because my son was in a daycare center, and I was traveling back and forth, and so I left Hughes. And through a friend, this is a very circuitous route to get into the show business, right? Because
Yeah, but fascinating one.
well, through a gal that lived in the same apartment building. This was on Eleanor Avenue, right off of Vine Street and Santa Monica Boulevard. Patty Gray. She was working for the Musicians Union. And I had left Hughes because I said, I just can't take this trip anymore, and I want to spend more time with my son. And so I worked as a waitress. I was working as a cocktail waitress in a bowling alley. I was doing a lot of little jobs. And Pat said to me one day, you know, they're hiring here at the union. If you're interested, I'll put your name in and, whatever. So I ended up working at Local 47.
Well,
And I worked for the secretaries, Bob Manning, secretary, Ruth Miner, and then I was her secretary. So I was the secretary's secretary.
my goodness.
And that was great fun, because all these wonderful musicians would come in to get their money or pay dues and things.
Where was the office located?
On Vine.
On Vine Street?
Right off of, right below Santa Monica Boulevard.
Mm.
And this was at the time when on the side of the building by the parking lot, there was this area probably about the size of this studio where they had instruments and things. I don't remember exactly now why, but they had this huge newspaper clipping on the wall. Nixon gets stoned in South America.
Oh, really?
That was kind of fun. I don't know why I remember that, but anyway. So anyway, from then,
I remember from my youth, the union president of the Musicians Union was a man named Petrillo, but he was probably long gone
oh yeah,
before you got there.
all of a sudden I can't think of it. Max something. I can't think of what his name is now, the man that was the president at the time.
I wonder if you were involved in. I used to be with Armed Forces Radio and Television Service, and we used to have agreements with the Musicians Union. You may have even seen some of those contracts back in those days.
Sure, absolutely.
And how long were you with them?
I can't remember, a couple of years, I think. I didn't stay that long because in the meantime, Patty left and went to work for Don Feddersen Productions at Desilu Studios. And she said, "There's an opening over here."
Oh, good friend.
Yeah, she was great. So I went to work at Don Feddersen Productions, and I worked in the business office for Charles Spira, who was I guess he was the treasurer, because we used to pay. It was accounting anyway, and I used to have to pay bills and keep the journals and all boring stuff. But the fun part was to go down on the set and steal coffee from the My Three Sons show.
Oh.
And a great thing that I remember was that one day, pardon me, this very good friend of mine that was one of the producers called me into his office and he said, "Kay, you better stop coming down to the set for coffee because Mr. McMurray is very upset. And he has put out a memo that says, staff people are not allowed on the set stealing our coffee."
Oh, my goodness.
Because I'd bring 2 cups back, one for Patty and one for Charles or something. So that was a big deal. I said, I didn't know he was such a tightwad.
No, Fred McMurray was a coffee Scrooge.
He was a tightwad.
My goodness gracious. Who knew?
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, during that time, I worked there for probably 4 or 5 years. And it was a very good job, and I had a lot of fun. I used to spend a lot of time at Paramount because we'd go over there for lunch. And then we get to see all the stars walking around and go on sets. I remember Donovan's Reef was being made, and they were shooting part of it there. And I saw Jack Warden with those blue eyes like Paul Newman's and that suntan look and the Hawaiian shirt. And
gee, I didn't
fell
know.
madly in love with him.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd forgotten he had blue eyes.
I didn't, yeah.
Of course, I didn't pay attention to those things.
I never met him or anything. I just saw him walking by a few times, but that was fun.
My Three Sons shot where and what's that?
At Desilu.
At Desilu.
Mm-hmm. And
Did you ever see Desi and
Lucy?
Lucy. Mm-hmm.
I used to sit out in front of her bungalow. There was a bench, and I would sit there and feed the blue jays that would come and land on our bluebirds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember the difference. One of them has a spiky head like a cardinal. But
probably blue jay because they're more common than bluebirds.
Yeah. And I remember one day it was very exciting because I was sitting there and the blue jay came and ate out of my hand, and Miss Ball came out of her dressing room and saw it, and she came up and sat with me and asked me about this and took some of my peanuts. And
really?
That was very exciting. I went back to the office and said, "Guess who I just got to talk to?" You know.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, it was very exciting.
Indeed.
Okay, so now I'm getting to the showbiz part.
Yep, you sure are. You're in the business.
My grandmother loved a show on television called Beat the Clock.
Uh-huh.
So I got tickets, and I took her to see that show.
That was with Bud Collyer? Or
no, it was
before him?
I can't remember his name.
Okay, it doesn't make any difference.
Well, it does to me. I hate it when I can't remember his name. But anyway, during the intermission, or whatever time it was, a man named Rick McClellan was coming along and asking people if they'd be interested in being on a game show, and if so, to take this form and fill it out and send it in and so on and so forth, which I did. And at that time, there was a show on the air called You Don't Say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't think about it. I went to work, and a few days, weeks, whatever passed, and one day I got a phone call, and it was to come in and audition to be a contestant on a show called Say When, which was being shot at KTLA. And it was the same company, Andrew Jageman Productions, that did You Don't Say.
Mm.
So I said, sure, I'll try that. Why not? Mm-hmm. So it was great fun. Colleen Gray was the female actress, and Richard Long was the male actor. And they'd give us a word, and we'd have to act it out, which was hysterical. Anyway, it was fun. And I won a trip to Rancho La Puerta, which was where you go for grape cures or something and dieting and what have you, which I ended up giving to my mother, and she and a girlfriend went, and they had a great time.
That was where? Rancho La Puerta in Mexico?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then from that, I became a contestant on You Don't Say.
Hmm.
And I won $500, a trip to Paris, a 5-piece set of American luggage, and $200 cash. And Alan Young was one of my stars that I played with.
Oh, really?
Which is a later story, but anyway. From that, Ralph Andrews was saying, I see that you're a secretary and you've got all these different experiences. He said, my secretary's leaving, and I was wondering if you'd be interested in coming to work for me.
And he was who again?
Ralph Andrews of Andrews Yeagerman Productions.
Okay.
And so I thought about, well, I said, well, I'll talk to you about it. So I went over on my lunch hour because their offices weren't far from mine. Mm-hmm. And it sounded so exciting because part of my job would be as his secretary, and the other part would be to book talent on You Don't Say. So naturally, I took the job.
Of course.
And I was with Ralph for probably 9 years. And in that time, I booked many shows. And at one point, we had 3 shows going. And he said, this is really too hard. Now, you have your choice. You can either be the talent coordinator or my secretary. And I said, I could be a secretary anytime. I want to be talent coordinator.
That's right.
So I was booking You Don't Say, Tattletales, and a show called I'll Bet. And then we did a couple movies, and I worked there for a while.
That kept you busy, I'll bet, with three shows, yeah.
Right. And then as the time passed and things were changing in the company and our shows were being canceled. By the way, we did shows in San Diego, up in San Francisco. And one of the shows that I was most proud of was called Liars Club, and little known fact, Rod Serling was our host. And it was great. He was fabulous.
Were the shows shot there on the lot on Desilu or Paramount?
No. We shot some at KTLA. We shot mostly at NBC.
NBC in Burbank.
Right. And then, so as the shows were being canceled, and one thing led to another, and finally I read in the paper that Password was coming to California. So I called Alan Ludden, because we used to hire Alan and Betty all the time. And I said, could you put in a good word for me? Because I don't want to work here anymore. The shows are all being canceled. I'm just sitting here, and I'd like to move on.
Sure.
So he did.
Good.
And I went to work for Goodson Todman.
Oh, wonderful.
And also John Harlan. We worked together. And another gal named Rita Moyes, who had worked for Goodson Todman in New York and was now working for Andrews Yeagerman. And Stu Phelps, who was the director. All 4 of us moved over to Goodson Todman.
And John was an announcer on some of those shows.
On Password and I've forgotten the others, but he did pilots and things too.
Yeah, sure. Well,
and so that's how I got into that part of the business.
Now your job was to book people to be on the shows.
I booked Password, and then we had other game shows, pilots and run-throughs and presentations, and I'd bring in celebrities, and we'd, take care of that. And then as shows sold, I would get a raise and book that show.
Yeah.
So we had Tattletales. And then I worked in production on Child's Play with Bill Cullen. And I worked in the booth on that. That was fun.
And Cullen used to be in New York, but he moved out here in his later career, I guess, huh?
Yes. Oh, and what a wonderful man. And his wife, Ann. Oh, I loved them. They were just fabulous.
I ate lunch today with Art Alisi. He was telling me about his aspect of the game show business, getting the prizes to give away. So you two had similar jobs, but different products.
Exactly.
You were with the People product, and he was with the Thing product.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. So you were with them for how long? Goodson Todman?
10 years.
10 years?
Yes. Oh, pardon me. And let's see. What did I do? Oh, so during this time, in my young running around drinking days.
Oh, you had those too.
Oh, yes. Martoni's, famous place on Cahuenga.
Yeah, it's very famous.
And then all the dancing joints from Virginia's on 8th Street downtown up to Stefanino's and the Villa Capri. We had dancing in all these places. So anyway, this girlfriend of mine and I, we met over the phone. She worked at AFTRA. And she and her sister and a couple other gals, we'd get together after work, and we'd start at the Jolly Roger downstairs. This is when I worked we were on Sunset and Cahuenga at that time. And so one night we're sitting there and we're getting bombed and getting ready to go, let's go dancing or whatever. And Tony said to me, we really have to stop this. We've got to do something more constructive. we should do, I have a friend named Tony Barr who has an acting class, and I think we should go. And I said, are you crazy? I couldn't do that. Charles Nelson Riley has an acting class. If we're going to go to an acting class, we have to go to Charles's class.
Uh-huh.
So...
Because you knew him from the game shows.
Yes, he was one of our regulars on Match Game.
Of course.
And so we went, and they had their classes at the DR Studios, Debbie Reynolds Studios in the Valley. Mm-hmm. And so we never did get to Charles's class. We went to Michael Holmes, and we looked, oh, that's okay. We went to Daryl Hickman's class. And both of us fell in love with him.
I'll bet.
Oh, we got to go to this class. So we studied with Daryl, and about a month or so later, Tony was very unhappy anyway, and she had wanted to move to Hawaii. Her sister was living there, and she had gone over a few times, and she said, I'm sick of this AFTRA stuff. I'm going to move. I'm going to go to Hawaii. So she left, and I thought I'd die because I didn't have my support, to go to class. Well, after 2 weeks, I didn't even know Tony who. Yeah. And so that was kind of a bug, and I used to do these crazy exercises outside in the lobby in their office. It was called the Grotowski, where you had to run across and jump up and punch and it was like to get your energy going. And Equity was right next door. And it was really funny because when I'd get frustrated because of different things that were going on in the office, I'd go out there and I'd go running up and down the hallway doing this exercise. And somebody always would come out from Equity and they'd go, oh, it's just that crazy lady from next door. Don't worry. It's okay.
They were used to seeing that.
So after 10 years, I just decided, why? I'm going to class. I'm doing things. I got to start doing it. Daryl kept saying, haven't you been auditioning? And I'm saying, no, I'm waiting for you to tell me. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I figured you'd be out there. You're great. You should. Mm-hmm. So I was having a problem with one of the shows with one of the producers. And at a Christmas party, I went over to Mark Goodson and I said, Mr. Goodson, please forgive me. I know this is not the time and place, but I want you to know that I can't work for this company any longer. And he says, is it so-and-so? And I said, well, yes, but it's a personality problem, but I just don't want to deal with it, and I'm going to leave. And I was worried because most of the time anybody who left the company was never allowed back.
Really?
Oh, yeah, he always took it very personally. Mm. And I said, I want to be an actress. I need to start now. I don't want to be 5 years down the road saying, gee, you could have tried and you didn't and this and that. And so, I just wanted you to be the first to know about it. And he said, I understand, dear. And he patted my hand, which I thought, what? Because he called everybody dearie because I don't think he knew our names, but he was fun. So I left on a Friday, and Saturday and Sunday I worked for them as a stand-in.
Oh, really?
So I started making AFTRA money, just being stand-in, doing that,
Uh-huh.
And then I did a lot of extra work for different movies and television, and then I got some parts. I had 5 times I worked on a show called Simon & Simon and had speaking roles. And
wonderful.
One Day at a Time, and that one with that crazy guy from Mary Tyler Moore show that died. I can't think of his name. The gray-haired guy that was...
Oh, Ted Baxter?
Yeah, he had a show. I can't remember the name of it either. But,
his own show. I remember that.
I worked on that, and... I just kind of hung out, but I've never been. What a dare used to say, you've got to be passionate.
Yeah.
I've never been passionate, so I never pushed. I mostly got my own work, and then I got an agent whom I called my obscuricist because she kept saying, we can't get you any work because you have no name. And I'm saying, well, I know other people have no names and they get work. Why? I'll do one word. I don't care. Something.
Yeah, sure.
No, they give those roles to other people, their friends and stuff. And so I was lazy and I never left. I'm still with her, actually.
Are you really?
Yeah. And
but did you enjoy the acting work?
I did. Mm-hmm. I did some great plays. I had wonderful... Oh, I have to digress and tell you the real thing that got me. The bug really bit me. One night I got a phone call from this guy that I was working on a scene with in class. And he said, Kay, I'm doing a play in a little theater called the Heliotrope, I think it was, way down weird in Glendale somewhere. And I just lost my elephant.
Your elephant?
And I was thin then. And he said, so I wondered if you'd be interested in the role. And he said, there's a little singing and dancing, but, it's a Noah's Ark,
Mm-hmm.
and it's mainly for children, but it's a great show, and we have so-and-so. And I said, well, I'll come and audition. He said, you don't have to audition. I know you can act. You can have the part if you want it. And I said, okay. So I went down, and it was comprised of the committee, which was the lion, the snake, the dove, and the elephant.
Oh, my.
And then Noah. And Noah, the guy that played Noah, Richard, was the one. No, it wasn't. Well, anyway, it was a human. I mean, he was Noah. And then some of the people played more than one role. They played like his children, and wife and so on.
Right.
So the first night we performed, and it's a very small venue. And of course I told everybody, I'm going to play, you got to come see me. So I'm out there and I'm peeking, oh, there's Breslow, there's, there's Frank, there's Gloria. I'm so excited. And they're all saying, don't do that, that's bad luck.
That's right.
I said, why? I know they're my friends. Even if I screw up, they're going to love me. They're my friends. Anyway, so I did that play, and it was written by a gal named Hildy Brooks, who has subsequently written other big plays. And this was like one of her first ones, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fun. I sang and danced and had this costume that was gray with like ears and a thing like came down like a little boa that represented a trunk, and gray tights. And
sure. Oh my God.
I sang, I'm Eleanor the elephant. I'm elegant and eloquent.
Oh my gosh. Now, had you ever sung before?
No.
This was your first time?
Yes.
My goodness. You are adventuresome.
I am. A bunch of us drove down to the South Coast Plaza, that great big theater down there, Performing Arts, whatever it's called. You see it on the freeway. It's a huge venue. I don't know, it's like 400 seats or something. Mm-hmm. And so a friend of mine said, come on, you're going to go too. We're going to go audition. I don't even remember what we... So I had my Match Game sweatshirt on and jeans because it had been raining. I brought my purse on stage with me. I didn't know. I'd never auditioned for anything like that. And I'm looking out at this huge thing. And they said, well, what would you like to sing? And I said, Happy Birthday. And I started singing Happy Birthday to You. And I heard them all laughing. And I heard this man, it could have been my imagination, but it was almost like he was disappointed, if she could just sing. Kind of thing. Like she would have been, because I just had him laughing, and I mean, it was.
Well, Happy Birthday is a song. And,
I know.
I mean, it does demonstrate one can either sing or not.
That's what I thought. Oh dear.
Some of the people on American Idol might take that on as a way of showing their talent.
That's right. Anyway, so that's that. Let's see. I guess. I don't know.
What happened next? You're acting in movies and doing a bit of stage work?
Yeah, and then I went to work. Because now I need some money because I haven't been working that much. I've been doing stand-in and extra, and they don't pay that much.
Nope.
So Bobby Sherman, not the singer, but Robert Sherman, who's Alan Sherman's son, he was one of the producers at Goodson Todman. And he had had surgery. Anyway, his house was a total wreck, and he said, if you're interested, I could have you come up and do stuff in my home. And so I went up there and I put files together and set up a whole system for him in his office, home office, and just found him to be the most fascinating person. I mean, the man was writing songs, and he's a genius. I mean, I don't know what today he's got a website, some kind of a game show website. And his daughter's graduated from college. But anyway, so I worked for him doing that. And then that was settled where he could handle everything himself. And then after that, right around the earthquake, I guess it was, I worked for Bob Marcucci, too. That's right, I forgot. Bob Marcucci was the manager who discovered Frankie Avalon and Fabian.
Oh, really?
And they made a movie roughly based on his life called The Idolmaker with Ray Sharkey.
I do remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Bob works out of his townhouse in Westwood. So I worked for him off and on for years. I mean, I'd work for him for so many months, and then I couldn't stand it anymore. I'd say, I can't do this anymore.
And then, what did that job entail?
I used to do the breakdowns
Hmm.
for the different shows in the mornings, which was very frustrating because I'd see roles for me, and I'd say, well, I can do this. Why isn't my agent submitting me for that role?
Yeah.
And Bob would say, well, give me your picture, we'll put it in. But we never got to do that because it was, by the time I'd get the breakdowns done, I had to have them done by a certain time when the messenger would pick them up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I think he didn't want to lose me, and so he didn't really want to help, do that.
Oh, yeah.
And when I called my agent, they'd either say, oh, that's already booked, or yeah, we sent you, whatever. And I knew they lied because I kept track of how many pictures I gave them, so I'd know how long it took for them to run out.
Sure.
Anyway, so it was very interesting working for Bob, and he has some really great clients as well as managing. And I got that job through Rona Barrett, by the way.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Now, how did you know Rona?
Well, I used to book her when I worked for Ralph Andrews.
Oh, okay.
She used to do our shows.
That's true.
And I read an article in the Hollywood Reporter, I think it was, that she was forming a company with her business partner.
Mm-hmm.
So I called her up and I said, is there room for me in your company? And she said, well, okay, we actually haven't formed it yet, but my partner needs a secretary. His name is Bob Marcucci. Send him your resume. I said, I don't have a resume. She said, well, make one up.
Yeah.
So I did, and I sent it to him, and then that's when I started working for Bob. And, of course, to this day, we're still friends, and periodically he'll call, and he'll say, my girl's going on vacation, and I'm really stuck. Have you got time? Can you come in and work a couple days or whatever?
Oh, great.
So,
You never know, do you, when you make these contacts in your various jobs, when they'll come back to pay dividends.
well, that's true, too.
Yeah.
And I've never regretted leaving a good-paying job. My dad he just almost had apoplexy over,
I bet.
what do you mean? You've got this great job and all that money you're making. How could you do that?
Yeah.
And I said, and I've never regretted it because I have worked in some of the most wonderful jobs and some of the craziest things that I've done that I can't regret it because I never would have had those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for a gal who used to put on shows, huge extravaganza shows for big companies, one of which was to promote the state of California.
No.
Now, this greater, whatever the company, I can't remember the name of this whole thing, they always promote the one state in the previous state that was honored
Oh.
or promoted.
Uh-huh.
So the previous state had been Washington. So my job was to book some people and take them up to Washington and into Seattle, and then we'd put this big show on, and she rented this huge ballroom in some hotel, and I brought up Troy Donahue, Ed Cookie Burns, and Dwayne Hickman, Daryl's brother, from Dobie Gillis.
Sure.
And at that time he was at CBS.
Uh-huh.
And Dwayne represented Malibu and wore a blazer and a captain's cap. Troy represented the beach people, and he wore this white, gorgeous jumpsuit, for the surfer thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Burns was some other Hollywood part. I forgot now, whatever. And they had these three areas, and my job after I got them there and settled, and she brought sand in
Oh, really?
to the ballroom,
Oh, my
and we
gosh.
had this huge banquet table in the center, buffet,
Mm-hmm.
And then I would go around to people and say, would you like your photograph taken? And I had a Polaroid camera, and I'd take their pictures and give them that,
Gee.
the thing.
Interesting. You mentioned Troy Donahue. He came to Panama when I was running the Armed Forces Radio and Television Network down there. And I was taken aback when I looked at his feet because, he's a big guy, but his feet were so small. So I asked him about it, and he said, he's had to have special shoes made all of his life because it doesn't fit his frame.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah. Really weird.
Oh, I have a radio story.
Do you?
When I worked for Don Feddersen Productions. He opened a commercial company on 3rd Street. And I did a commercial with Wink Martindale.
Oh, you did?
And it was for warehouse. I guess it was the warehouse. And we sat at a table at some place in Hollywood. I don't remember now. And Rick McClellan, who used to work for Ralph, was producing it. And the whole job was that we had to pretend it was nighttime, and I had to say, wink, wink, I think I hear something. And then he'd say, what? And then he'd say, oh, it's just the Our House sale at the warehouse or whatever. anyway, it was great fun. We had to do it over and over because I'm thinking I'm a method actress,
Mm.
and I hadn't even got. Well, I guess I was going to class, but so I kept going like this to Wink, like waking him up. Wink, Wink. I think I hear something. And Rick would say, "What is that noise?" Well, I had bracelets on.
Oh, you were rattling
And I
others.
was rattling.
Oh, dear.
So we fight it, but I did hear it on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
So I forgot I had a radio credit.
That was back in the days when you had the actors in the studio together, not like today where they might do separately
Right.
the voice tracks and have them edited together. Excellent. Well, you've had a very varied experience all the way, and now lead us up to the present time.
Well, I became a member of PPB when Wink Martindale called, and he said, "I'm going to be honored Friday at the Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters. Why don't you come and, call Jean DeVivier Brown and set up and come and, see me."
Sure.
And Sandy. And so I called Jean, and of course Jean and I had been friendly for years, but we weren't real close, but we knew each other and were, friendly. And so she said, "Sure, fine, come over and we'll have a ticket and the whole thing." And
Mm-hmm.
and when I walked in, John was standing there, and I hadn't seen John for a long time. And of course he was president then.
Yes.
And so he turned around and he went, "Henley!" And he gives me a big hug and he says, "Give this girl an application." And so I had such a wonderful time. I bought 2 of Wink's books.
Oh, boy.
And the food was great. And I saw all these people that I hadn't seen for such a long time.
It's a wonderful place to meet people you haven't seen for years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Boy.
So I joined. And then down the road I got roped into the...
Well, you came along at a time when we certainly needed somebody with your experience and your dedication to do that.
Well, I didn't really get roped into it. I was joking. I mean, it was an honor to be invited to do this, and I am happy to do it.
Excellent. Well, you're the grandma living nearby, granddaughter, did you say?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yes.
That's always wonderful. Our 2 daughters also live close by, and the grandchildren are nearby. And we are envious, not envious, we have friends who are envious of us who have grandchildren living across the country and don't get a chance to see them very often.
Aw.
So it's nice to have that.
Yeah.
Anything else we need to talk about? Okay.
I don't think so. No, I'm not. I'm hanging out. I do have something.
Okay.
My 15 minutes of fame
Uh-huh.
came in the form of a print job that was out a few years ago on the backs of almost every magazine there is, magazines I had never even heard of, where it was a Citibank identity theft
Mhm.
print. I had on my gray wig, and I was getting a tattoo.
Oh, my gosh.
And in some magazines, it was a 2-page, opened up, and on one side it would say, "We didn't believe it either."
Mm-hmm.
Glenda from Duluth, or whatever the name they made up for me was, because
Sure.
I'm getting this huge tattoo.
Uh-huh.
And
Fake one, of course.
and I can't believe they hired this one tattoo artist, Andre, who has his own place down in the beach, to come in, and he painted this dragon on my left arm all the way from the shoulder down to my elbow, and then had to wait for it to dry. It was all black, just the outline, and then brought in an actor to pretend he was a tattoo artist. And Andre had filled in a little of the red smoke and fire and some of the green scales, and then this guy was acting like he was finishing it. And then they had to pay for this place that we did it at, which was another tattoo parlor.
Oh, wow.
I was amazed. I
I'll
thought,
bet you were.
they make so much money. So I was very thrilled when the magazine came out, and of course I bought all these magazines, and then I thought, why did you do that? This is the same picture.
What was the magazine again?
Well, it was on Esquire, Time. Time it was on like 4 times.
Oh, my gosh.
Life, Sports Illustrated,
Uh-huh.
Elle, Jane, Women, W, that huge one, People. It was on everything. And then 2 years later, a friend of mine called and said, "Did you know your picture's out again?" And I said, "What?" "No, I didn't know that." So I called my agent. And I said, "Are you aware of the fact that they're using that same photograph again? And don't you think we should get paid for that?" And she said, "No, I didn't know that." So they went and they found one, and then they contacted him, and I got $2,000
Good.
That was very good.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice surprise. I always like to ask people that we talk to on these audio histories to name celebrities they've worked with who you really enjoyed meeting and working with. And then, if you want to, on the other side of the coin, are there any people you really wouldn't like to work with again?
Gee, it's hard because I'm still starstruck. And I was so starstruck when I worked for Ralph Andrews. I'm trying to think of. I just adored all of them. I mean,
nobody treated you poorly except Frederick Murray, who didn't want you to take his coffee.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I think not that I wouldn't have worked with her again, but the one that I thought was the most interesting was Zsa Zsa. Because she brought her little dog with her, and I had to go to the cafeteria and make sure I got skinless breast of chicken and bring that back. And when she had to go to the restroom, I had to go with her and hold her skirt for her.
Oh, my goodness.
And I thought, well, this is really
that's an unusual assignment, isn't it?
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And she thought nothing of it. Evidently, it goes, it happens all the time. So I would work with her again anyway. I mean, if she weren't in bad shape. But I just thought that was such an interesting thing.
Indeed. I guess the term lady in waiting applies there.
I guess. Oh, Charles Bronson. I was when I first started, and I walked in, and he had a big cigar in his mouth, and he was like, I don't know, just seemed kind of obnoxious to me. Mm-hmm. But he was a big star, and I thought, well, I got him some coffee or whatever it was he wanted and everything. But I don't know if I would have wanted to work with him again after that, because I just thought he was kind of icky.
Oh, but darn. Well, very interesting.
Henry Fonda.
Henry Fonda. You worked with him?
Henry Fonda did Password.
Oh.
He was absolutely charming.
I'll bet.
And Lucille Ball. And I got to go to Lucille's house, by the way. I said, a long time later, and with Alan. Because we would go to people's homes to teach them how to play Password.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And Lucy hadn't played, so we went and we taught her. And we had Rock Hudson, and he was very nice.
I'll bet Betty White was fun, too, huh?
Oh, she was the best.
Yeah.
Oh, and I was telling Frank earlier that while I was working for Andrew Jageman, we did 5 half-hour shows aboard the SS Statendam that was a combination game, reunion. I mean, we did everything. And Alan Young was our special guest, and his wife Kay were on this. And Wink Martindale was our host. Gary Lamel was our male singer, who's now like the head of Columbia Music. And a gal named Eileen Barton was our little girl singer.
Interesting.
And we didn't sell the pilot. Had a lot of NBC guys with us, but they didn't buy it.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
Free trips, but no buy.
No buy. Too bad.
Yeah.
Well, we've been having a wonderful conversation with Kay Henley, the membership chairman of Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters, on this February the 12th of 2007. Kay, nice to have you here, and thanks for the hour-long conversation. And this is Jerry Fry speaking. Thanks for listening.